She was 19 years old the day her father sold her for $300 and a sack of flour. Not kidnapped, not stolen, sold, like livestock, like furniture, like something disposable. Elena Voss stood in the freezing mud outside a collapsing homestead while two men shook hands over her future, and in that moment she made a promise to herself. Whoever thought they owned her would learn exactly how wrong they were. This is the story of a girl who refused to stay broken, a brutal frontier that tried to crush her, and the impossible love born in the ashes of survival. If you want to see how far this story travels, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. Let's see where Elena's fight reaches across the world. The wagon rattled over frozen ground, and Elena Voss kept her eyes fixed straight ahead because looking back would shatter what little control she had left. Her father hadn't even watched her leave. He'd taken the money, pocketed it without counting, and disappeared into the barn before the stranger's hand ever touched her arm. No goodbye, no apology. Just the sound of his boots crunching through dirty snow, fading into silence while she stood there with her bag at her feet and her breath turning to smoke in the November air. "You got anything else?" the man had asked. She'd looked at him then. Really looked. Somewhere past 40, maybe older. Tall, broad-shouldered, face weathered like old leather, dark coat buttoned to the throat, hat pulled low, eyes that didn't blink much. "No," she'd said. "Then get in." That was it. No negotiation, no reassurance, just two words and a wagon that smelled like hay and iron, and now she was sitting on a bench that creaked with every rut in the road, heading north into country she'd never seen, bought by a man whose name she didn't even know yet. Elena pulled her coat tighter. It wasn't much of a coat, thin wool patched at the elbows, missing two buttons. Her mother's coat, once. Back when her mother was still alive and the farm still had crops, and her father still looked people in the eye. The man driving didn't speak. He sat rigid, reins loose in his gloved hands, shoulders set like he was carved from the same frozen timber surrounding them. The horse plodding ahead was just as silent, a big gray mare with a scar across her flank and mud caked up past her knees. Elena counted her breaths. In, out, in, out. If she focused on breathing, she wouldn't think about the fact that her entire life had just been reduced to $300 and a transaction her father couldn't complete fast enough. "How far?" she asked finally. The man didn't turn. 2 days. 2 days. 2 days sitting next to someone who'd purchased her like a plow or a milk cow. 2 days before she'd see whatever godforsaken place he was dragging her to. "What's your name?" she tried again. This time he glanced sideways, just for a second. "Grant Holloway." "Where are we going?" "My ranch." "And what am I supposed to do there?" His jaw tightened. "Work. Same as everyone else." Work. As if that explained anything. As if she hadn't been working herself half to death for the last 3 years, keeping her father's farm from collapsing entirely. As if she didn't know what work was. What kind of work? The kind that keeps you fed. Elena bit down on her tongue so hard she tasted copper. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to ask what kind of man bought another human being in 1887 like it was normal, like it was decent, like she was supposed to be grateful for the privilege. But she didn't. Because screaming wouldn't change where she was, and it wouldn't get her anywhere except dumped on the side of a frozen road in the middle of nowhere. So instead, she stared at the trees and swallowed her rage and told herself she'd survived this. She'd survived everything else. The first night, they stopped at a ranger outpost, a squat log building with a sagging roof and smoke pouring out of a crooked chimney. Inside, it smelled like unwashed men and burnt coffee. 4 rangers sat around a table playing cards, and they all looked up when Grant walked in. "Holloway," one of them said, nodding. Grant nodded back. "Need a place for the night." "You and the girl?" Elena stood in the doorway, bag still clutched in both hands, feeling every pair of eyes crawl over her like insects. "Yeah," Grant said flatly. The ranger grinned, gaps between his teeth. "She don't look like much." "She's not your concern. Just saying, 300 seems steep for something that scrawny." Elena's face burned. She wanted to spit in his face, wanted to tell him exactly what she thought of men who spent their evenings drinking rot gut and gambling instead of doing anything useful. But Grant stepped forward before she could open her mouth. "You got space or not?" The ranger shrugged. "Back room. Costs extra." Grant tossed coins on the table without counting them. Fine. The back room was barely a room at all, more like a storage closet with a straw mattress shoved against the wall and a blanket that looked like it hadn't been washed since the war. Elena sat down on the edge of the mattress and set her bag beside her. Grant stood in the doorway. You eat yet? No? There's stew in the front. Help yourself. He turned to leave. Mr. Holloway. He stopped. Didn't turn around. Why'd you do it? Elena asked quietly. Do what? Buy me. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, without looking back, he said, Needed help. Your father needed money. Simple as that. It's not simple. Didn't say it was right. Said it was simple. And then he was gone, pulling the door shut behind him, and Elena was alone in a room that smelled like mildew and old smoke, listening to men laugh in the next room about things she didn't want to understand. She didn't cry. She'd stopped crying 2 years ago when her mother died and her father started drinking himself unconscious every night. Crying didn't fix anything. Crying just made you weak. Instead, she lay down on the straw mattress, pulled the dirty blanket over herself, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion dragged her under. The second day was colder. The sky hung low and gray, promising snow that hadn't fallen yet. They rode in silence again, the wagon creaking, the horse's breath steaming in the frigid air. Around midday, Grant finally spoke. You know how to cook? Elena glanced at him. Yes. Clean? Yes. Handle livestock? I grew up on a farm. That a yes? Yes. He nodded once. Good. That was it. No further questions. No attempt at conversation. Just confirmation that she could perform the tasks he'd bought her for. Elena looked down at her hands. They were rough, calloused, scarred from years of work her father should have been doing himself. She'd milked cows in the freezing dark, hauled water until her shoulders screamed, scrubbed floors on her knees until her back gave out. And for what? So her father could sell her the second things got bad enough? Do you have a wife? She asked suddenly. Grant's hands tightened on the reins. No. Did you? His jaw worked. Once. What happened? She died. The finality in his voice killed any follow-up questions. Elena turned her attention back to the road and didn't ask anything else. They reached the ranch just before sunset. It wasn't what Elena had expected. She wasn't sure what she'd expected exactly. Maybe something grand, something that justified spending $300 on another person. But what she saw was a cluster of weathered buildings huddled against the base of a tree-covered ridge, surrounded by split-rail fences and fields that looked like they hadn't been properly worked in years. The house itself was 2 stories, log construction, with a stone chimney and shutters that hung crooked. The barn was bigger than the house, dark and imposing, its roof patched with mismatched boards. There were a few other structures, a chicken coop, a smokehouse, what might have been a bunkhouse, but everything looked worn down, tired, like it was barely holding itself together. Grant pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. This is it, he said. Elena climbed down, her legs stiff from 2 days of sitting. She stood there in the fading light, bag in hand, looking at the place that was apparently going to be her prison. The front door opened and a boy stepped out. He was maybe 15, 16, tall and gangly, with the same dark hair as Grant and the same hard set to his mouth. He looked at Elena with open suspicion. Who's she? He asked. Her name's Elena, Grant said, climbing down from the wagon. She's here to help. Help with what? Everything. The boy's eyes narrowed. You bought her. It wasn't a question. Grant didn't answer. He just grabbed Elena's bag and walked toward the house. Come on. Elena followed, ignoring the boy's stare. Inside, the house was dim and cold. The main room had a fireplace, a rough-hewn table, a few chairs. Everything was functional, nothing decorative, no curtains, no rugs, no sign that anyone had tried to make it feel like a home. Upstairs, Grant said. Second door on the right. That's yours. Elena climbed the stairs. They creaked under her weight. The hallway was narrow, the walls bare. She opened the second door and found a small room with a bed, a chest, and a single window overlooking the barn. She set her bag down and sat on the edge of the bed. This was it. This was her life now. Downstairs, she heard voices, Grant and the boy, talking in low tones. She couldn't make out the words, but the boy sounded angry. Grant sounded tired. Elena stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was sinking behind the ridge, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The land stretched out in every direction, empty, frozen, unforgiving. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and made herself a promise. She would survive this, she would work, she would learn, she would make herself indispensable. And when the time was right, when she'd saved enough or figured out a way, she would leave. She would walk away from Grant Holloway and his broken ranch and the father who'd sold her, and she would never look back. But first, she had to make it through tonight. Dinner was venison stew, hard bread, and silence. Elena sat at the table across from the boy, Eli, Grant had called him, while Grant ladled stew into chipped bowls. The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing shadows across the walls. "You cook this?" Eli asked, not looking at her. "No," Elena said. "Good. Means you can't make it worse." Grant shot him a look. "Eli." "What? I'm just saying." "Say less." Eli shrugged and went back to his food. Elena picked up her spoon and ate slowly. The stew was bland, underseasoned, but it was hot, and she was hungry enough not to care. "Tomorrow you'll start on the house," Grant said, addressing Elena without looking up. "Needs cleaning, needs organizing, needs a lot of things." "Fine," Elena said. "After that, the chickens. Eli'll show you where everything is." Eli made a noise that might have been agreement or protest. Hard to tell. "What about the boy?" Elena asked. Grant frowned. "What about him? Does he do anything besides sit around looking sullen?" Eli's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." "I do plenty," Eli said, his voice rising. "I work this ranch just as much as he does." "Could have fooled me." "You've been here 2 hours." "Long enough." Eli slammed his spoon down. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Someone who's not going to be pushed around by a teenager with an attitude problem." "Eli," Grant said sharply. "Enough." "She started it." "I said enough." Eli shoved his chair back and stalked out of the room. A moment later, the front door slammed. Grant sighed and rubbed his face. "You didn't have to do that." "He was rude." "He's a kid." "He's old enough to know better." Grant looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, something other than indifference crossed his face. It might have been surprise. Might have been respect. Hard to say. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly. "What did you expect?" "Someone quieter." Elena smiled without humor. "Sorry to disappoint." "Didn't say I was disappointed." He stood, picked up his bowl, and walked to the fireplace. He stared into the flames for a long moment, shoulders tense, before speaking again. "My wife died 4 years ago," he said. "Fever. Took her in 3 days. After that, things fell apart. Couldn't keep up with the work. Couldn't keep up with Eli. Couldn't keep up with anything." Elena didn't respond. She just listened. "I didn't want to do it this way," Grant continued, "buying someone. But I didn't see another option. Needed help. Needed someone strong enough to handle this place. Your father said you were tough. Said you could work. So you bought me." "Yeah." "And now what?" Grant turned to face her. "Now you work. You earn your keep. And when you've saved enough, if you want to leave, you leave. I won't stop you." Elena stared at him. "You're saying I can go?" "When you've earned it, yeah. How long will that take?" "Depends on you." It wasn't freedom, not really, but it was something, a crack in the cage, a possibility. "All right," Elena said. "Then I'll work." Grant nodded. "Good." He left the room, and Elena sat alone at the table, staring at the dying fire, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders. She'd been sold. She'd been brought to a dying ranch in the middle of nowhere. She'd been treated like property. But she wasn't broken. Not yet. Well, the days that followed blurred together into a relentless rhythm of work. Elena woke before dawn, dressed in the freezing dark, and went downstairs to start the fire. She made coffee, cooked breakfast, cleaned the kitchen. Then she moved to the rest of the house, sweeping, scrubbing, hauling out years of accumulated dirt and neglect. The house had been left to rot, dust coated every surface. Cobwebs hung in the corners. The floors were scarred and stained. It was clear that after Grant's wife died, he'd stopped caring about anything except basic survival. Elena didn't complain. She just worked. She scrubbed the floors on her hands and knees until her knuckles bled. She washed the windows until they were clear enough to see through. She beat the rugs outside until the dust made her cough. She reorganized the kitchen, threw out moldy food, patched holes in the walls with whatever materials she could find. Eli avoided her. He'd appear for meals, eat in silence, and disappear again. Grant barely spoke. He spent most of his time outside, working the land, fixing fences, tending to livestock that Elena hadn't even seen yet. At night, she collapsed into bed too exhausted to think. But slowly, the house started to change. It started to look less like a tomb and more like a place people could actually live. One morning, about a week in, Elena was in the kitchen kneading bread dough when Eli walked in. He stopped in the doorway looking around. "It's different," he said. Elena didn't look up. "That's what happens when you clean." "I mean, it looks better." "Still a long way to go." Eli shifted his weight. "You need help with anything?" Elena paused, surprised. "You offering?" "Maybe." She nodded toward a basket in the corner. "You can take the eggs to the cellar." Eli grabbed the basket and headed for the door. Then he stopped. "Sorry," he said, "for being a jerk." Elena looked at him. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's fine," she said. "No, it's not. I didn't want you here. Didn't want him bringing someone in like that. Felt wrong." "It is wrong." "Yeah." Eli finally looked at her. "But you're not what I thought you'd be." "What did you think I'd be? Scared, weak, someone who'd cry all the time and not do anything." Elena smiled grimly. "I don't cry." "I noticed." He left with the eggs, and Elena went back to her bread. It wasn't much, but it was something. 2 weeks into her time at the ranch, Elena finally saw the full extent of the property. Grant had been working on the north fence line, and when he came back to the house for lunch, he told her to come with him. "Why?" she asked. "Because you should know what you're working for." They rode out on horseback, Grant on a black gelding, Elena on the same gray mare that had pulled the wagon. She wasn't a great rider, but she could handle herself well enough. The ranch was bigger than she'd realized. Hundreds of acres of rolling land, forested ridges, open pastures. There were cattle scattered across the fields, not many, maybe 60 or 70 head, and a creek cutting through the eastern section. "Used to have twice as many cattle," Grant said as they rode. "Lost most of them over the last few years. Disease, predators, couldn't afford to feed them through the winter." "Why not sell the land?" "Because it's mine." Simple answer, stubborn answer. They stopped at the top of a ridge overlooking the valley. From here, Elena could see the whole spread, the house, the barn, the fields, the creek glinting in the afternoon sun. "It's beautiful," she said. Grant glanced at her. "You think so?" "Yeah, it's dying, but it's beautiful." He looked back at the land. "That's what she used to say, my wife. She loved this place, more than I did, I think." "What was her name?" "Catherine." Elena didn't push for more. They sat in silence, the wind cold against their faces, the horses shifting beneath them. "You really mean it?" Elena asked finally. "That I can leave when I've earned it?" "Yeah." "How will I know when that is?" Grant considered. "When you've put back into this place what I paid for you. When you've made it worth something again." "And if I can't?" "You will." "How do you know?" "Because you're still here. If you were going to break, you'd have done it already." Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and turned her horse back toward the house. Winter hit hard. Snow piled up against the sides of the buildings. The wind screamed through the gaps in the walls. The temperature dropped so low that water froze solid in the well, and they had to melt snow just to drink. Elena learned to split firewood, haul water, keep the fires burning through the night. She learned which chickens laid eggs and which ones were just eating feed for no reason. She learned how to shovel paths through snow so deep it came up to her waist. Grant and Eli worked from dawn to dark, battling the cold, struggling to keep the livestock alive. Elena cooked massive pots of stew, baked bread until her hands cramped, kept the house warm enough that they didn't freeze when they came in at night. One evening, a blizzard rolled in so fierce that they couldn't see 10 feet past the windows. The wind howled like something alive, rattling the shutters, piling snow against the door. Grant came in covered head to toe in ice, his face raw and red. "Lost 3 calves," he said, shaking snow off his coat. "Couldn't get to them in time." Elena handed him coffee. "I'm sorry. Not your fault." He sat by the fire, staring into the flames, and Elena saw something she hadn't seen before: defeat. "We're not going to make it," he said quietly. "Yes, you will." "You don't know that." "I do." He looked at her. "How?" "Because you haven't quit yet." Grant held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded and went back to his coffee. The storm lasted 3 days. When it finally broke, the world outside was buried under 4 feet of snow. They spent a week digging out, salvaging what they could, trying to assess the damage. But they were still standing. Whoosh. Spring came slowly, reluctantly. The snow melted, the creek swelled. The fields turned from white to brown to green. Elena planted a garden behind the house. Vegetables, herbs, anything she could coax out of the hard ground. Eli started talking to her more. He'd sit in the kitchen while she cooked, asking questions, telling stories about his mother, complaining about his father. Elena listened. She didn't offer advice. She just listened. Grant remained distant, but there were moments, brief, fleeting moments, when she'd catch him watching her. Not with suspicion or calculation, with something else, something softer. One afternoon, Elena was out in the garden when she heard shouting. She looked up and saw a rider approaching fast. Grant and Eli were already moving toward him, and Elena stood, brushing dirt off her hands. The rider pulled up hard, his horse lathered and wild-eyed. "Holloway," the man said, breathless. "You need to hear this." "Hear what?" "Victor Kane, see, he's buying up everything south of the ridge. Every homestead, every claim. He's offering pennies and threatening anyone who won't sell." Grant's face went hard. "How close?" 3 miles, maybe less." "Who sold?" "Thompson, Andrews, the widow Morris." "Hell!" Elena stepped forward. "Who's Victor Kane?" The rider looked at her like she'd just appeared out of nowhere. Grant ignored the question. "Tell everyone to hold," Grant said. "Don't sell. I'll talk to Kane myself." The rider nodded and rode off. Eli looked at his father. "What are you going to do?" "What I have to." Grant walked toward the barn, and Elena followed. "Who is Victor Kane?" she asked again. Grant didn't stop. "A problem." "That's not an answer." He spun around, and for the first time she saw real anger in his eyes. "He's a land baron, buys up property, squeezes out anyone who won't sell, and turns it all into one big empire. He's been circling this area for years, and now he's closing in. So don't sell." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because if you don't sell to Victor Kane, bad things happen. Fences get cut, livestock disappears, barns burn down, people get hurt." Elena's stomach tightened. "And you think he'll come after you?" "I know he will." "Then we fight." Grant stared at her. "We? You think I'm just going to stand by and watch everything fall apart? This isn't your fight. You made it my fight when you bought me." Grant opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked into the barn. Elena stood there in the sunlight, feeling the weight of something enormous settling onto her shoulders. She'd survived being sold. She'd survived the winter. She'd survived everything this place had thrown at her. But this was different. This was war. And whether Grant Holloway liked it or not, she wasn't going anywhere. Victor Kane arrived 3 days later. Elena was scrubbing the porch steps when she saw the dust rising from the road. A column of it, thick and deliberate, like someone wanted to announce their arrival from miles away. She straightened, wiping her hands on her apron, and watched as 4 riders came into view. The man in front sat his horse like he owned not just the animal, but the entire world beneath its hooves. He was older than Grant, maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair and a face that looked carved rather than aged. Expensive coat, polished boots, a rifle resting easy across his saddle. Behind him rode 3 men who looked like they'd been hired specifically to make people nervous. Big, hard-eyed, the kind of men who didn't ask questions before throwing punches. Grant emerged from the barn, Eli close behind. Elena moved to the edge of the porch, her pulse quickening. Kane reined in his horse 20 feet from the house. He didn't dismount, just sat there, looking down at Grant with something that might have been amusement. "Grant Holloway," Kane said. His voice was smooth, educated. "Been a while." "Not long enough," Grant said. Kane smiled. "I'd heard you were still clinging to this place. Wasn't sure I believed it." "Believe what you want."
"Oh, I believe plenty. I believe you're barely holding on. I believe you lost half your herd last winter. I believe you're one bad season away from losing everything." Grant's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Kane?" "What I've always wanted, your land. It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, Grant. It's just a matter of price." "Then you can't afford it." Kane's smile widened. "I'm offering twice what this place is worth. More than fair, considering its condition."
"I don't care if you're offering 10 times. Answer's still no." "That's disappointing." Kane shifted in his saddle, his gaze sweeping across the property. "You've let it go to hell, you know. Catherine would have been heartbroken to see it like this." Grant took a step forward. "Don't you say her name." "Touched a nerve, did I?" Kane's tone didn't change. Still pleasant, still casual. "I'm just stating facts. This ranch is dying. You're dying with it. Why not take the money and start somewhere fresh?" "Because it's mine. For now." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Eli moved closer to his father, his hands balled into fists. Elena stayed where she was, watching, calculating. Kane's eyes found her then. He looked her up and down, slow and deliberate. "And who's this?" he asked. "None of your business," Grant said. "New housekeeper or something else?" Elena felt her skin crawl under his gaze, but she didn't look away. She stared right back at him, letting him see that she wasn't afraid. Kane chuckled. "Spirited. I like that." He turned his attention back to Grant. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you 2 weeks to reconsider my offer. After that, the price drops. And if you still refuse, well," he gestured vaguely. "Accidents happen. Fences fail. Livestock wanders off, you understand." "That a threat?" "It's a reality. You're surrounded, Grant. Everyone south of here has already sold. You're the last holdout. Don't be stupid." "Get off my land!" Kane's expression didn't change. He just tipped his hat, turned his horse, and rode off. His men followed, and within minutes they were gone, leaving nothing but settling dust and a silence that felt heavier than the air before a storm. Grant stood motionless, staring at the empty road. Eli looked at him, then at Elena, then back at his father. "What are we going to do?" Eli asked. Grant didn't answer. He just turned and walked back toward the barn. Elena watched him go, her mind racing. She'd seen men like Victor Kane before, back when her father's farm was failing and the creditors started circling. Men who smiled while they destroyed you, men who took everything and called it business. "He's scared," Eli said quietly. Elena looked at him. "Your father?" "Yeah. He won't admit it, but he is. He should be. Kane's not bluffing." "So what do? We get ready." "For what?" Elena looked back into the road where the dust was still settling. "For whatever comes next." Check. That night, Grant didn't come in for dinner. Elena cooked anyway, roasted chicken, potatoes, greens from the garden that were just starting to come in. She set the table for 3 and waited. Eli appeared, ate in silence, and disappeared again. The third plate sat untouched. When full dark had settled and the fire was burning low, Elena grabbed a lantern and went looking for him. She found Grant in the barn, sitting on an overturned bucket, staring at nothing. The lantern light carved deep shadows across his face. "You need to eat," Elena said. "Not hungry." "Don't care. You're eating anyway." Grant looked up at her. "You always this stubborn?" "You bought someone stubborn. Deal with it." A ghost of a smile crossed his face, then vanished. "He's going to come after us, you know, Kane. He doesn't make idle threats." "I know. You should leave, before things get bad." Elena set the lantern down and crossed her arms. "Where exactly would I go?" "Anywhere. Town. Find work. I'll give you money." "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want? To not run away like a coward." Grant stood, his expression hardening. "This isn't your fight." "How many times are you going to say that before you realize it's not true anymore?" Elena stepped closer. "I've worked this ranch for months. I've bled for it. I've kept this place from falling apart while you and Eli barely held it together.
You think I'm just going to walk away now? It's not about what you've done. It's about what's coming. Kane will burn this place to the ground if he has to. I won't let you get caught in that. You don't get to decide what I do or don't get caught in. They stared at each other in the flickering light, and Elena saw something shift in Grant's eyes. Not agreement, exactly, but recognition, like he was finally seeing her as something other than a transaction. Why? He asked quietly. Why stay? Elena didn't have a good answer, not one that made sense. She barely understood it herself. Why she cared about a ranch that wasn't hers. Why she was willing to fight for a man who'd bought her like livestock. Why the thought of leaving made her chest feel tight and wrong. Because I'm tired of losing, she said finally. Grant didn't respond. He just picked up a hammer from the workbench and turned it over in his hands. I built this place with Catherine, he said. Every fence post, every board. We came out here with nothing and turned it into something. When she died, I let it all slip away because I didn't care anymore. Didn't see the point. And now? Now I don't know. I look at it and I see all the ways I failed her, failed Eli, failed everyone. So fix it. It's not that simple. It never is. But sitting in a barn feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to stop Kane. Grant looked at her, something like anger flashing across his face. Then it faded, replaced by exhaustion. You don't pull your punches, do you? Would you prefer I lie? No? He set the hammer down. No, I wouldn't. Elena picked up the lantern. Your food's getting cold. Come eat. This time, he followed. Tunk. The attack started small. A section of fence on the eastern pasture was cut during the night. 20 head of cattle wandered off, and it took Grant and Eli 2 full days to round them up. Then a week later, someone poisoned the creek upstream. They lost 4 calves before they figured out what was happening and moved the herd. Grant rode into town to file a complaint with the sheriff. He came back 3 hours later, his face tight with barely controlled rage. What did he say? Elena asked. Nothing. Said there was no proof. Said it could have been anyone. That's horseshit. That's politics. Kane owns half the businesses in town. Sheriff's not going to cross him. Eli slammed his fist on the table. So we're just supposed to let him do whatever he wants? No, Grant said. We protect what's ours. They started taking shifts through the night. One person awake at all times, watching for movement, listening for trouble. Elena took the late shift, sitting on the porch with a rifle across her lap and a blanket around her shoulders, staring into the darkness until her eyes burned. She'd never fired a gun before coming to the ranch. Grant had taught her during the spring, showing her how to load, aim, breathe. She wasn't a great shot, but she was good enough to hit what she was aiming at if it wasn't moving too fast. The nights were long and cold and empty. She'd sit there listening to the wind, the distant sounds of the cattle, the occasional cry of something wild and hunting. Sometimes she'd see movement in the tree line, and her heart would slam into her throat, but it always turned out to be nothing. A deer, a coyote, shadows playing tricks. One night, about 2 weeks after Kane's visit, Elena heard hoofbeats. She stood gripping the rifle, every muscle tensed. The sound grew louder, closer, and then a rider emerged from the darkness, moving fast. Grant! Elena shouted. Someone's coming! The front door slammed open and Grant appeared, pulling on his coat, Eli right behind him. The rider pulled up hard in front of the house. A young man, maybe 20, his face flushed and panicked. Mr. Holloway, he gasped. It's the Dawson place. Kane's men torched it. Grant went still. When? Hour ago. Maybe less. They barely got out. House is gone. Barn, too. Anyone hurt? Mrs. Dawson burned her hands trying to save their cow. The kids are scared, but they're all right. Grant ran a hand through his hair, his expression dark. Where are they now? Took shelter with the Mitchells, but Mr. Dawson sent me to warn you. Said you're next. Elena felt ice slide down her spine. Grant looked at her, then at Eli. Get inside, he said. Both of you. No, Elena said. This isn't up for debate. You're right. It's not. Elena stepped forward. If they're coming, we need to be ready. Hiding inside isn't going to stop them. She's right, Eli said. Grant looked between them, and Elena saw the conflict written across his face.
the instinct to protect them warring with the knowledge that they didn't have enough people to defend the ranch alone. "Fine," he said finally, "but you do exactly what I say. Understood?" They both nodded. Grant turned to the rider. "Go back to the Mitchells. Tell everyone to stay inside, keep their fires low. I'll send word if we need help." The young man rode off, and Grant stood in the yard, looking at the dark horizon like he could see the future written there. "They'll come tonight," he said. "Kane wants to make an example. Show everyone what happens when you don't sell." "How many men does he have?" Elena asked. "Enough, maybe 10, 12 if he brings everyone. And we have 3.
"Yeah." Eli's voice cracked slightly when he spoke. "We can't fight that many." "We're not going to fight," Grant said. "We're going to make them think twice about starting one."
They spent the next hour preparing. Grant and Eli moved the remaining cattle to the far pasture away from the buildings. Elena soaked blankets in water and draped them over the barn doors, the hen house, anything that might catch fire easily. They loaded every gun in the house, set lanterns at strategic points around the property, and filled buckets with sand. Grant pulled Elena aside while Eli was checking the barn. "If things go bad," he said quietly, "I want you to run. Take one of the horses and ride for town. Don't look back." Elena shook her head. "I'm not leaving." "Elena, I said I'm not leaving. You're wasting your breath." Grant stared at her, and for a moment she thought he might argue. Instead, he just nodded and handed her a revolver. "Keep this on you. If anyone gets close, use it." Elena took the gun. It was heavier than she expected, cold and solid in her hand. "I've never shot anyone before." "Hopefully you won't have to, but if it comes down to you or them, don't hesitate." "I won't." They waited. The hours crawled by. Midnight came and went, 1 in the morning, 2. Elena sat on the porch, rifle beside her, revolver tucked into her belt, watching the road. Eli paced near the barn. Grant stood by the corral, motionless as stone. At 2:30, Elena saw the first torch. It appeared in the distance, a small point of light bobbing through the darkness. Then another, and another. Within minutes, there were at least 8 of them, moving closer, spreading out as they approached the ranch. "They're here!" Elena called. Grant and Eli moved to flank her. They stood together in front of the house, 3 figures against the night, waiting. The riders stopped about 50 yards out. The torches illuminated rough faces, hard eyes, men who looked like they'd done this before. In the center sat Victor Kane, mounted on a white horse, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "Last chance, Holloway," Kane called out. "Take my offer and walk away, or stay and lose everything." "Already gave you my answer," Grant shouted back. "Then you're a fool." Kane raised his hand and the men started to advance. Grant lifted his rifle. "Stop right there." They kept coming. Grant fired a shot into the air. The crack echoed across the valley, and the horses shied, but the riders steadied them and kept moving. "Next one's not a warning," Grant said. "You shoot one of my men," Kane said calmly, "and I'll make sure you hang for it." "Worth it," Kane laughed. "You really think you can stop all of us?" "I think you don't want to find out." The riders were 30 yards away now. 20. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands were slick with sweat despite the cold. Eli raised his rifle, his hands shaking. "Steady," Grant murmured. 10 yards. And then, from the darkness behind them, more lights appeared. Elena whipped around and saw riders emerging from the trees, 5, 6, 7 of them, carrying rifles, spreading out to form a line between Kane's men and the ranch. At the front rode a gray-haired man Elena recognized from town, Samuel Mitchell, the rancher who'd taken in the Dawsons. Beside him was the young rider who'd brought the warning, and next to him were men Elena had never seen before, but whose faces carried the same grim determination. "That's far enough, Kane," Mitchell called out. Kane's smile faltered. "This doesn't concern you, Samuel." "Like hell it doesn't. You've been terrorizing this valley for years, and we're done with it. You're outnumbered." "Are we?" Mitchell gestured behind him, and more riders appeared. "Word travels fast. Seems folks are tired of being pushed around." Elena counted quickly. At least 15 men, maybe more in the shadows. Kane's riders shifted uneasily, hands moving toward weapons but not drawing them. Kane's face went cold. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake was letting you get this far. Mitchell said. Now turn around and get off Holloway land, unless you want to explain to the federal marshal why you're burning down homesteads. There's no marshal coming. You sure about that? Because I sent word 3 days ago. Should be arriving in town right about now. It was a bluff. Elena could tell by the slight tension in Mitchell's shoulders, but it was a good one. Kane clearly wasn't sure, and uncertainty was a crack in his armor. For a long moment, nobody moved. The torches flickered, horses stamped and blew. Elena's finger rested on the trigger of her rifle, ready. Then Kane lowered his hand. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah, it is," Grant said. "You've pushed your last homestead. Touch my land again, and I'll kill you myself." Kane stared at him, and Elena saw murder in his eyes. But he was smart enough to know he'd lost tonight. He pulled his horse around and rode off, his men following, the torches retreating into darkness. Nobody spoke until they were gone. Then Mitchell dismounted and walked over to Grant. "You all right?" Grant nodded. "Thanks, Samuel. Didn't expect backup. Figured you'd need it." Dawson losing his place lit a fire under folks. Pardon the expression. Mitchell looked at Elena, then Eli. "You've got good people here." "Yeah," Grant said quietly. "I do." The other ranchers started to disperse, heading back to their own properties, but a few stayed behind to help watch through the night. Elena finally allowed herself to breathe, her legs suddenly weak. Eli sat down hard on the porch steps. "I thought we were dead." "We're not," Grant said. "Not yet." Elena looked at him. "Is Kane really going to stop?" "No, but tonight bought us time." "How much?" "Enough to figure out what comes next." The next 3 weeks were a kind of uneasy peace. Kane's men didn't return, but everyone knew it was temporary. Grant sent word to every homestead in the valley, organizing a network of riders who could raise the alarm if Kane made another move. Mitchell and a few other ranchers started holding meetings in town, talking about forming a cattlemen's association for mutual protection. Elena threw herself into the work harder than ever. The house was clean now, the garden producing, the chickens laying steady. She started helping with the cattle, learning to ride better, to rope, to read the signs of sick animals before they got worse. Eli started teaching her how to shoot properly. They'd go out into the fields in the early morning, setting up targets, old bottles, chunks of wood, anything that would break when hit. Elena's aim improved. Slowly, but it improved. One afternoon, she and Eli were walking back from the shooting range when he asked, "You think my dad's scared?" Elena glanced at him. "Of Kane?" "Of everything. Losing this place, losing me, being alone." "Probably. He doesn't show it. That doesn't mean he doesn't feel it." Eli was quiet for a while. Then, "Do you like it here?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "Here. The ranch. Do you like it?" Elena thought about it. A year ago, hell, 6 months ago, her answer would have been immediate and angry. But now, walking across land she'd helped save, toward a house she'd made livable, with a boy who'd stopped seeing her as an intruder and started seeing her as something like family, the answer wasn't so simple. "Yeah," she said, "I think I do." "Even though you were bought?" "I'm not going to pretend that part doesn't make me angry. It does. Every day. But that doesn't mean the rest of it isn't worth something." Eli nodded. They walked in silence for a bit longer. "He looks at you different now," Eli said. "Who? Your father?" "Yeah, like he's trying to figure something out." Elena's face warmed. "He's probably just wondering if I'm going to poison his food." "No, it's not that." Eli gave her a sideways look. "I think he's starting to care about you, like actually care." Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The storm broke on a Tuesday. Elena was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard the gunshot. Not close, but not far either. She stood, shading her eyes, and saw smoke rising from the direction of the east pasture. She ran. By the time she reached the fence line, Grant and Eli were already there, staring at the damage. Someone had cut the fence again, but this time they'd also shot one of the steers, a clean kill straight through the head. The animal lay in the grass, flies already gathering. "Kane," Grant said flatly. "How do you know?" Elena asked. "Because this is a message. He's showing us he can reach our herd whenever he wants. Eli kicked at the dirt. So what do we do? We moved them again, closer to the house this time. They spent the rest of the day herding cattle, fixing fence, salvaging what they could. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and everyone was exhausted. That night, Grant called a meeting with Mitchell and the other ranchers. They gathered in the barn, lanterns casting long shadows, voices low and urgent. He's escalating, Mitchell said, testing to see what he can get away with. We need the marshal, another rancher said. Legal backing. Marshal's not coming, Grant said. I checked. Kane's got friends in the territorial office. Our request got buried. Then what? Grant looked around the circle of tired, angry faces. Then we handle it ourselves. You mean fight him? I mean defend what's ours. If Kane wants war, we'll give him one. That's insane, someone said. He's got money, men, connections. We're just ranchers. Yeah, we are, Grant said. And this is our land. Either we fight for it or we lose it. Those are the only options. The room fell silent. Elena stood in the shadows near the door, watching, listening. Finally, Mitchell spoke. If we do this, we do it smart. We fortify our properties, set up watch rotations, make sure Kane knows we're ready, and we document everything, every attack, every threat. Build a case strong enough that even his friends can't ignore it. Agreed, Grant said. They talked for another hour, mapping out strategies, dividing responsibilities. When the meeting broke up, the ranchers rode off into the night, leaving Grant and Eli and Elena alone in the barn. Grant extinguished the lanterns one by one until only darkness remained. You think it'll work? Eli asked. I think it's our only shot. Elena stepped forward. What do you need me to do? Grant looked at her. In the faint moonlight filtering through the gaps in the walls, his face looked older, harder. I need you to keep doing what you've been doing. Keep this place running. Keep Eli safe. And you? I'm going to make sure Victor Kane understands that we're not backing down. How? Grant smiled, but there was no humor in it. By hitting back. The retaliation came 3 nights later. Grant and Mitchell, along with 4 other ranchers, rode to one of Kane's line camps, a small outpost where his men stayed while working the eastern range. They didn't burn it, didn't kill anyone, just cut every fence within 5 miles, scattered his cattle, and left a note nailed to the door. Stay off our land. When Kane found out, he sent 10 men to the Holloway Ranch. They came at dawn, riding hard, guns drawn. But this time, Elena and Eli were ready. They'd spent the previous 2 days setting up defenses, barricades, firing positions, pre-positioned ammunition. When the riders appeared on the horizon, Elena rang the bell Grant had mounted by the house, and within minutes, Mitchell and 6 other ranchers came thundering in from their watch positions. The 2 groups faced each other across the yard. Kane's foreman, a brutal-looking man named Hatcher, sat at the front. "Holloway!" he shouted. "Come out!" Grant stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "I'm here." "You made a mistake." "Did I?" "Mr. Kane wants you to know that fence cutting goes both ways, so does killing livestock." "Then tell Kane to stop starting fights he can't finish." Hatcher's hand moved toward his gun. Instantly, every rifle on Grant's side came up, a dozen barrels aimed at Kane's men. "Go ahead," Mitchell called out. "Give us a reason." Hatcher's eyes flicked across the line of armed ranchers. He was outnumbered, and he knew it. After a long, tense moment, he spat into the dirt. "This isn't over." "It is if you keep riding," Grant said. Hatcher wheeled his horse around and left, his men following. But as they retreated, one of them turned in his saddle and fired a shot toward the house. The bullet splintered the porch railing inches from where Grant stood. Elena didn't think. She raised her rifle and fired back. The shot caught the rider in the shoulder, spinning him sideways in his saddle. He cursed, grabbed the reins with his good hand, and kept riding. Everyone stared at her. "What?" Elena said, lowering the rifle. "He shot first." Grant looked at her for a long moment. Then he started laughing, a rough, incredulous sound. Eli joined in, and then Mitchell, and suddenly the whole group was laughing, the tension breaking like a fever. "Remind me not to make you angry," Grant said. Elena smiled despite herself. "Too late." The war continued in fits and starts over the next month. Fences cut, livestock stolen, barns damaged. But the ranchers held together, and Kane's advantage began to erode. He couldn't move freely anymore, couldn't terrorize isolated homesteads without risking a confrontation with a united front. Elena found herself in the middle of it all. She rode patrol with the men, carried messages between ranches, helped organize supply runs into town. She learned to shoot not just accurately but quickly, learned to read tracks and signs of approaching riders, learned to keep her nerve when things got dangerous. And somewhere in all of it, something shifted between her and Grant. It was nothing she could point to exactly, just small moments, the way he'd check on her after a long day, the way he'd ask her opinion during planning meetings, actually listening to her answers, the way he'd look at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention, like he was seeing someone he hadn't expected to find. One evening, they were alone in the barn repairing tack when Grant spoke. "I was wrong about you." Elena looked up from the saddle she was oiling. "About what?" "Everything. I thought you'd be, I don't know, different. You thought I'd be easy to control." "Yeah. Sorry to disappoint." "You didn't." He set down the leather strap he'd been working on. "I'm glad you're here. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm glad you stayed." Elena's heart did something complicated in her chest. "Even though I cost you $300, especially because of that, means I got one hell of a bargain." She laughed, surprising herself. "You're an idiot." "Probably." Grant stood and walked over to where she sat. He stopped a few feet away, hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. "Elena, The barn door slammed open. Eli burst in, breathless. "They're burning the Mitchell place," he gasped. "Just got word. Half his herd scattered and the house is going up." Grant was moving before Eli finished speaking. "Get the horses, now." They rode out with every able-bodied man in the valley, 15 riders pushing their horses to the limit. By the time they reached the Mitchell ranch, the house was an inferno, flames reaching toward the night sky, heat so intense they couldn't get within 50 feet. Samuel Mitchell stood in his yard, his face black with soot, his wife and children huddled behind him. His hands were blistered, his eyes red. "They came out of nowhere," he said hoarsely. "Didn't even give us time to grab anything, just torched it." Grant dismounted. "Did you see who?" "Kane's men. Hatcher was leading them." "Where are they now?" "Rode south, maybe 20 minutes ago." Grant turned to the other ranchers. "We're going after them." "Grant," Mitchell said. "Don't. That's what he wants. Wants you to do something stupid so he can have you arrested." "I don't care." "You should. You get locked up, Kane wins, your ranch falls apart, Eli's alone, and everything you fought for is gone." Grant's hands clenched into fists. Elena could see the rage radiating off him, the desperate need to hit back, to make someone pay. She stepped forward and put a hand on his arm. "He's right," she said quietly. Grant looked at her. "They burned his house, Elena." "I know, and we'll make them pay for it. But not tonight, not like this." "Then how?" "Smart, like Mitchell said. We document everything, we get witnesses, we build a case they can't ignore." "That takes time we don't have." "Then we make time." Grant stared at her, then at the burning house, then back at her. Slowly, the tension in his shoulders eased. "All right," he said finally. "We do it your way." They spent the rest of the night helping the Mitchells salvage what they could and setting up temporary shelter. By dawn, Elena was exhausted, covered in soot, her hands aching. Grant found her sitting on the tailgate of a wagon, staring at the smoldering ruins. "You were right," he said, sitting beside her. "About what?" "About staying calm. If I'd gone after Hatcher, I'd probably be in a cell right now." "Probably." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun rise over the destruction. "When this is over," Grant said quietly, "when Kane's dealt with and things settle down, you're free to go, if you want." Elena looked at him. "What if I don't want to?" Grant met her eyes. "Then you stay." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Elena felt something warm unfold in her chest, something she hadn't let herself feel in a very long time. Hope. "All right," she said, "then I'll stay." Grant nodded, and they sat together as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, and for the first time since she'd arrived at the ranch, Elena felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The sky turned dark 3 days later, and it had nothing to do with the weather.
Elena was in the kitchen kneading bread when she heard the horses. Not the usual sound of Grant and Eli coming back from the fields, but something faster, more urgent. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch, just as two riders came tearing into the yard. One of them was young Dawson, the kid whose family had lost their house. The other was a man Elena didn't recognize, older, with wild eyes and a face covered in road dust.
"Where's Holloway?" Dawson shouted, sliding off his horse before it had fully stopped. "Out checking the north fence," Elena said. "What's happened?" "Kane's gathering men, lots of them. Word is he's planning something big." The older man spat into the dirt. "Not just planning, doing. He hit the Carson place last night, killed 2 of their horses, and beat Carson so bad he can't stand up." Elena's blood went cold. "When?" "Few hours before dawn. Carson's wife got away, raised the alarm. By the time anyone got there, Kane's men were gone." "How many men is he gathering?" "At least 20, maybe more. He's pulling in hired guns from 3 counties over." Elena's mind raced. 20 men, armed and paid to do whatever Kane wanted, against maybe 15 ranchers who were already stretched thin trying to protect their own properties. "Go find Grant," she told Dawson. "North fence, half-mile past the creek. Bring him back now." Dawson nodded and rode off. The older man stayed, his horse blowing hard, foam flecking its chest. "You're Elena, right?" he asked. "The one who shot Hatcher's man?" "Yeah." "Good. We're going to need people who can shoot." He looked at the house, the barn, the layout of the property. "This place is exposed. Too many approaches. If Kane decides to hit you here, it'll be bad." "I know." "You got a plan?" Elena looked at him. "We will." Grant arrived 20 minutes later, Eli beside him, both of them riding fast. He dismounted and strode straight to Elena. "Tell me." She told him everything: Carson, the gathering men, the 20-plus guns Kane was assembling. Grant's face went harder with every word. "He's done waiting," Grant said when she finished. "He's going to try to wipe us out in one go." "Can he?" Eli asked, his voice tight. "If we let him, yeah." The older man spoke up. "Mitchell's calling everyone to his place tonight. Emergency meeting. We need to decide how to handle this." Grant nodded. "We'll be there." The man rode off, and Grant stood in the yard staring at nothing, his jaw working. Elena could see him running through scenarios, calculating odds, trying to find a way out that didn't end with people dead. "We could leave," Eli said quietly. "Just pack up and go. Start somewhere else." "No," Grant said immediately. "Why not? It's just land." "It's not just land," Grant's voice cracked like a whip. "It's everything your mother and I built. It's the only thing I have left of her. I'm not giving it up. Not to Kane, not to anyone." Eli flinched. Elena stepped forward. "Then we fight smart," she said. "We use what we have. This ranch, these people, the fact that Kane's overconfident." Grant looked at her. "You got something in mind?" "Maybe. But I need to know how far you're willing to go, as far as it takes." "Even if it means playing dirty?" Grant's expression didn't change. "Kane's been playing dirty from the start. I'm done being the one with morals." Elena nodded. "Good. Then here's what we do." The meeting at Mitchell's place that night was tense and crowded. Every rancher in the valley who hadn't already been driven off showed up, along with their sons, hired hands, anyone who could hold a gun. They packed into Mitchell's barn. The house was still nothing but charred timbers, and the air was thick with anger and fear. Mitchell stood at the front, his face still raw from burns, his voice hoarse. "Kane's made his move. He's got hired guns. He's got money, and he's got the law looking the other way. If we don't do something now, we're all going to end up like Carson, or worse." "What can we do?" someone called out. "We're outnumbered 2-1. "Maybe 3-1, another voice added. "Heard he's bringing in more men from Silver Creek." The crowd started murmuring, panic spreading like wildfire. Elena watched Grant, saw him calculating, saw the moment he decided to speak. He stepped forward. "We stop reacting and start acting." The murmuring died down. "Kane's been controlling this fight from the beginning," Grant continued. "He picks when to hit, where to hit, who to target. We've been scrambling to defend, and it's not working, so we changed the game." "How?" Mitchell asked. Grant looked at Elena. She stepped forward, her heart pounding, feeling every eye in the barn turn to her. Kane's strength is his men and his money, she said. But that's also his weakness. Those hired guns, they're not loyal. They're mercenaries. They'll fight as long as they're getting paid and winning. The second things get hard, they'll run. So what are you suggesting? Someone asked. We make things hard. We hit his supply lines, his resources, his reputation. We make him look weak. Make his men question whether they're backing the right side. A rancher near the back scoffed. And how exactly do we do that? By hitting him where he doesn't expect it, Grant said. Kane thinks we're just going to sit here and wait for him to burn us out one by one. So we don't wait. We take the fight to him. That's suicide, someone said. No, Elena said. It's survival. You want to know what's suicide? Sitting here doing nothing while he picks us off. The room fell silent. Elena could see the fear in their faces, but she could also see something else. Desperation. They were out of options, and they knew it. Finally, an old rancher named Garrett spoke up. What exactly are you proposing? Grant pulled out a rough map he'd drawn on a piece of paper. Kane's got 3 line camps scattered across his territory. They're where his men sleep, where he stores supplies, where he keeps his extra horses. We hit all 3 in one night. Burn them to the ground. You said we weren't going to be like him, Mitchell said. I said we'd be smart. This is smart. We cripple his operation, scatter his men, show everyone in this valley that Kane's not invincible. And if we get caught, we don't get caught. We move fast, hit hard, and we're gone before anyone knows what happened. The ranchers looked at each other. Elena could see them weighing it, testing the idea against their fear. I'm in, Garrett said finally. Me too, another voice called. And me. One by one, hands went up. Not everyone, some held back, too scared or too cautious, but enough. More than enough. Grant nodded. We move tomorrow night. Everyone brings whatever guns they have, whatever supplies. We split into 3 groups, hit all 3 camps simultaneously. By the time Kane figures out what's happening, we're already gone. What about our families? Someone asked. Our ranches. If we're all out there, who's protecting them? The women, Elena said. Every head turned toward her. The wives, the daughters, anyone who can shoot. They stay behind, fortify the ranches, watch for trouble. Kane's not going to expect that either. A woman near the front, Carson's wife, her face still streaked with soot from trying to save her husband, spoke up. We can do that. We've been sitting around feeling helpless long enough. Other women nodded. Elena saw something shift in the room, the fear giving way to something harder, determination. Mitchell looked at Grant. You really think this'll work? I think it's our only shot. Then let's do it. The next day was a blur of preparation. Grant and Elena rode to each participating ranch, coordinating positions, making sure everyone understood the plan. Eli stayed behind to help the women set up defenses, barricades, firing positions, signal systems in case Kane retaliated. By late afternoon, Elena's legs ached from riding, and her voice was raw from talking. She and Grant stopped at a creek to water the horses and catch their breath. You nervous? Grant asked. Terrified, Elena admitted. Good. Means you're thinking straight. She looked at him. You ever done anything like this before? No. You? Obviously not. They both laughed, the sound bitter and tired. Grant sat down on a rock near the water's edge. If this goes wrong, it won't. If it does, he insisted, I need you to take Eli and run. Get as far from here as you can. We've been over this. I know, but I need to hear you say it. Elena sat beside him. I'm not leaving. Not you, not Eli, not the ranch. So stop asking. Grant looked at her, really looked at her, and Elena felt something pass between them, something unspoken but heavy with meaning. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. You're right. You don't. He smiled despite himself. You always this honest? Only when it matters. Grant reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. Elena's breath caught in her throat. When this is over, he said, if we survive, I want to do this right. Court you properly. Ask permission instead of just assuming. You bought me, Grant. Pretty sure traditional courtship is out the window. Then we make new traditions. Elena squeezed his hand. I'd like that. They sat there for a long moment, hands joined, watching the water flow past. Then Grant stood and pulled her to her feet. Come on, we've got work to do. They gathered after nightfall at a spot 2 miles south of Kane's territory. 15 men on horseback, armed with rifles, revolvers, torches, and determination. The moon was a sliver, barely providing light, which was exactly what they needed. Grant divided them into 3 groups. He'd lead the assault on the main camp. Mitchell would take the eastern camp. Garrett would hit the western one. Elena insisted on going with Grant's group, and after a brief argument that she won simply by refusing to back down, he relented. Remember, Grant said, addressing everyone, we're not here to kill anyone. We're here to destroy supplies and send a message. You see someone? You give them a chance to run. They don't take it, then you do what you have to. Clear? Everyone nodded. Move out. The group split up, melting into the darkness. Elena rode beside Grant, her rifle across her lap, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The main camp was the largest, a cluster of 4 rough buildings and a corral with maybe 20 horses. As they approached, Elena could see lamplight in one of the buildings, shadows moving behind canvas walls. Grant held up a hand and they stopped. He gestured to 2 men, sent them around to the corral, gestured to 2 more, sent them to flank the buildings. Then he looked at Elena. You stay with the horses. Like hell. Elena, we don't have time to argue. Let's go. They dismounted and moved forward on foot, slow and quiet. The camp was eerily still except for the murmur of voices from the lit building. Grant signaled. The men by the corral cut the fence and spooked the horses, sending them scattering into the night. At the same moment, Grant's group rushed the supply shed. Someone shouted. A door slammed open and men came pouring out, 4, 5, 6 of them, half-dressed, confused, reaching for weapons. Drop them, Grant shouted. One man went for his gun anyway. The rancher beside Grant fired, and the man went down clutching his leg, screaming. The others froze. Get out, Grant said. Run or die. Your choice. They ran. Grant's men moved fast, dousing the buildings with oil, piling up supplies. Elena helped, her hands shaking but steady enough. When everything was ready, Grant lit the first torch. Do it, he said. They threw the torches. Fire caught immediately, racing across the oil-soaked wood, climbing the walls, devouring everything. Within minutes, the entire camp was an inferno. Go, Grant shouted. They mounted up and rode hard, flames lighting the sky behind them. Elena looked back once and saw the destruction they'd caused. Buildings collapsing, smoke billowing, total chaos. They met up with the other groups an hour later at the rendezvous point. Mitchell's team had succeeded. So had Garrett's. 3 camps, all burning, all destroyed in a single, coordinated strike. Any casualties? Grant asked. One of mine got winged, Garrett said. Nothing serious. You? We had to shoot one of Kane's men, leg wound. He'll live. Good. Let's get home before anyone tracks us. They rode back under the cover of darkness, exhaustion and adrenaline mixing into something that felt almost like hope. When they reached the Holloway Ranch, Elena was so tired she could barely climb down from her horse. Eli ran out of the house. Did it work? It worked, Grant said. Kane's going to lose his mind. That's the idea. They put the horses away and stumbled inside. Someone had made coffee, probably the women who'd been watching the ranch, and Elena drank it black and scalding, feeling it burn all the way down. Grant sat across from her at the table. His face was streaked with soot, his eyes bloodshot, but there was something different in his expression. Not quite victory, more like grim satisfaction. You were right, he said to Elena. Hitting back was the right move. Don't celebrate yet. Kane's going to retaliate. Let him. We'll be ready. Kane retaliated 2 days later, but not the way they expected. Instead of attacking the ranches directly, he went to town and filed formal charges. Arson, destruction of property, assault. He had witnesses, his men who'd escaped the fires, and even though everyone knew those witnesses were liars, the law was the law. The sheriff showed up at the Holloway Ranch on a gray morning, looking uncomfortable. Grant, he said, not dismounting, I got warrants for you, Mitchell, Garrett, and 6 others. Grant stood on the porch, Elena beside him. On what charges? Arson.
Kane's pressing the case, says you burned his camps, shot his men. His men were terrorizing this valley. I know that. You know that. Doesn't matter. He's got the legal high ground now. So what happens? You come in peaceable, we sort it out in court. You resist, things get ugly.
Elena stepped forward. This is insane. Kane's been burning houses, killing livestock, beating people. Where were the warrants for him? The sheriff looked at her, and she saw the shame in his eyes. I'm sorry, miss, I truly am, but Kane owns the judge, owns half the town. I'm just doing my job. Your job is to protect people, Elena said. Not enable tyrants. I know. The sheriff's voice was barely a whisper. But I got a family. I can't. I just can't. Grant put a hand on Elena's shoulder. It's all right. He looked at the sheriff. Give me an hour to get my affairs in order, then I'll come in. The sheriff nodded and rode off. Elena whirled on Grant. You can't seriously be considering this. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. We fight. And then what? The sheriff brings a posse? People die. Maybe you, maybe Eli. I'm not risking that. So you're just going to let Kane win? I'm going to play the game smart. If I go in peaceable, I look like the reasonable one. Kane looks like the aggressor. That matters. It doesn't matter if you're in jail. Grant took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Elena's eyes burned. I don't want to lose you. You won't, I promise. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think that somehow this would work out, that justice would prevail, that doing the right thing would matter. But she'd seen too much, lost too much to believe in easy answers. Still, she nodded. Okay, I trust you. Grant kissed her forehead, then went inside to pack. Watch it. They arrested 8 men that day. Grant, Mitchell, Garrett, and 5 others. Loaded them into a wagon and hauled them to town, locked them in a jail that wasn't built to hold that many people. Elena rode in with them, Eli beside her. She watched them disappear behind iron bars and felt something crack inside her chest. What do we do now? Eli asked. We get them out. How? Elena looked at the courthouse across the street, a squat stone building with Kane's lawyer walking up the steps, briefcase in hand, smile on his face. We find proof, she said. Real proof. Something even Kane's judge can't ignore. For the next 3 days, Elena barely slept. She rode to every ranch in the valley, talked to every person who'd been victimized by Kane, collected testimonies, documented damage. She organized the women into shifts, making sure the ranches stayed protected while the men were locked up. On the 4th day, she was in town posting bond money, everything Grant had saved, plus contributions from the other families, when she overheard 2 men talking outside the general store. Whole thing's a setup, one was saying. Kane's planning to move on the Holloway place tonight. Figures with Grant in jail, there's no one to stop him. Elena's blood turned to ice. She stepped around the corner. Say that again. The men looked at her, startled. One of them was a ranch hand she recognized, the other a stranger. You, Elena? The stranger asked. Yeah. Your man's in trouble. Kane's got 20 men riding out tonight. They're going to burn the Holloway ranch, scatter the herd, make sure there's nothing left to come back to. Why are you telling me this? The stranger shifted uncomfortably. Because I used to work for Kane. Quit last week when I realized what kind of man he really was. Figured you folks deserved a warning. When tonight? After midnight, maybe later? Elena's mind raced. Grant was locked up. The ranch was vulnerable. Even with the women defending it, 20 armed men would be impossible to stop. Unless she didn't try to stop them at all. An idea started forming, reckless, dangerous, probably insane. But it might work. I need you to do something for me, she told the stranger. What? Ride to every ranch. Tell them what's happening. Tell them we need everyone at the Holloway place by midnight. Every man, woman, and child who can hold a gun. That's suicide. No, Elena said. It's bait. By 11 that night, the Holloway ranch was transformed. 40 people crowded into the house, the barn, the outbuildings. Ranchers' wives, teenage sons, old men who'd fought in the war, anyone willing to make a stand. Elena had positioned them carefully, hidden from view, waiting in the darkness. Eli stood beside her on the porch, rifle in hand, his face pale but determined. You sure about this? He asked. No, but it's too late to back out now. At midnight, they heard the horses. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. No turning back. The riders came into view, a dark mass of men, torches burning, moving toward the ranch like a wave of destruction. At the front rode Victor Kane himself, and beside him was Hatcher, his shoulders still bandaged from where Elena had shot him. They stopped 50 yards from the house. Kane's voice rang out across the night. Holloway, come out and face me! Elena stepped onto the porch, alone, lamplight illuminating her from behind. Kane laughed. The girl? Where's Grant? In jail? Elena called back. Thanks to you. Then this'll be easier than I thought, Kane gestured to his men. Burn it, all of it. The men started forward. Elena raised her hand. I wouldn't. And why not? Because you're surrounded. On cue, lanterns lit up all around the property. In the windows, in the barn, in the tree line. 40 rifles pointed at Kane's men from every direction. Kane's smile faltered. He looked around, seeing the guns, the faces, the sheer number of people who'd shown up to defend this place. You're bluffing, he said. Am I? Elena stepped down from the porch. You wanted a war, Kane. Now you've got one. But here's the thing. You're outnumbered. You're outgunned. And everyone here has seen what you've done. Burned houses, killed livestock, beat people until they couldn't stand. We've got witnesses. We've got documentation. And if you make one move toward this ranch, we've got 40 people who'll testify that you attacked first. The law's on my side. Not anymore. Elena pulled a folded paper from her pocket. This is a telegram from the federal marshal's office. They're sending investigators. Should be here in 3 days. And when they arrive, they're going to hear every story, see every burned building, talk to every family you've terrorized. Your bought judge won't be able to help you. It was a bluff. The telegram was real, but the marshal's office had only promised to look into it, which could mean anything or nothing. But Kane didn't know that. His face went dark with rage. You think you're clever? I think I'm desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. Kane stared at her, and Elena saw him calculating, weighing his options. He could attack, but even if he won, the cost would be high. His men would die. The publicity would be devastating. The marshal's investigation would be impossible to stop, or he could retreat, live to fight another day. Slowly, Kane raised his hand. His men lowered their torches. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, Elena said. It is. You just don't know it yet. Kane wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. Elena watched until they disappeared into the darkness. Then her legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the porch steps. Eli ran to her. You okay? No, but we won. People started emerging from their hiding spots, talking excitedly, relief flooding through the crowd. Someone started cheering. Others joined in. But Elena just sat there, shaking, tears streaming down her face, because she'd gambled everything on a bluff. And somehow it had worked. Grant was going to kill her, or kiss her, possibly both. Grant was released 2 days later along with the others when the charges were quietly dropped. Elena was waiting outside the jail when they brought him out, and the look on his face when he saw her was something between relief and fury. He walked straight to her and pulled her into his arms so hard she couldn't breathe. You could have gotten yourself killed, he said into her hair, but I didn't. You stood in front of 20 armed men and bluffed your way through. Seemed like the right move at the time. Grant pulled back and looked at her, and Elena saw his jaw working like he was trying to find words and failing. Finally, he just shook his head and kissed her, hard and desperate and completely improper in the middle of town where everyone could see. Elena didn't care. She kissed him back. When they finally broke apart, Mitchell was grinning at them. About damn time. Grant ignored him. Tell me everything. Start from when they arrested us. They rode back to the ranch together, and Elena filled him in on every detail. The warning from Kane's former hand, gathering the Valley families, the standoff, the telegram that may or may not bring actual help. Grant listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each piece of the story. The telegram was a bluff? He asked when she finished. Mostly. I did send one. They said they'd look into it. That's not the same as sending investigators. I know, but Kane didn't. Grant was quiet for a long moment. You're either the bravest person I've ever met,
or the most reckless? Can I be both? Apparently. When they reached the ranch, Eli came running out. He stopped short when he saw his father, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to show relief. Grant dismounted and grabbed the boy in a hug that looked like it hurt. "You did good," Grant said, "taking care of things while I was gone." "Elena did most of it."
"I know, but you backed her up. That counts." Eli nodded, blinking hard. They went inside together, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt like something other than a battlefield. But the peace didn't last. 3 days later, a man rode up to the ranch wearing a federal marshal's badge. Elena was hanging laundry when she saw him coming. She dropped the sheet she'd been pinning and ran to find Grant, who was in the barn shoeing a horse. "Marshal's here," she said breathlessly. Grant straightened. "Alone?" "Looks like it." They walked out together. The marshal was an older man, weathered and lean, with gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He dismounted slowly, like his bones hurt. "Grant Holloway?" he asked. "That's me." "Marshal William Cross. Got word there's been some trouble in this valley." "That's putting it mildly." Cross looked around the property, taking in the patched fence, the defensive position still visible from the standoff, the general air of a place that had been under siege. "Mind if we talk?" They sat on the porch, Grant, Elena, Cross, and Mitchell, who'd arrived within the hour after hearing a marshal was on the property. Cross pulled out a small notebook and a pencil worn down to a nub. "Start from the beginning," he said. So they did. Grant told him about Kane's land grabs, the intimidation, the burned houses. Mitchell added details about the Dawson place, his own losses. Elena described the attacks on the Holloway ranch, the cut fences, the poisoned creek. Cross wrote it all down, his expression never changing. "You got proof of any of this?" he asked when they finished. "Witnesses," Grant said. "Plenty of them." "Physical evidence?" "Kane's smart. He doesn't leave much behind. That makes it hard to build a case." Elena leaned forward. "What about the testimonies? We've got 20 families who can tell you exactly what he's done." "Testimonies help, but without physical proof, it's one person's word against another's. And from what I hear, Kane's got resources. Good lawyers. Friends in high places." "So you're saying he's going to get away with it?" Grant said flatly. "I'm saying it's complicated." Cross tucked his notebook away. "But I'll do what I can. I'll talk to people, gather statements, see if I can find anything concrete." "How long will that take?" "Few weeks, maybe more." Grant stood abruptly. "We don't have weeks. Kane could burn half the valley in that time." "Then I suggest you keep doing what you've been doing. Defend your property, document everything, stay within the law." Cross stood as well. "I know it's not the answer you want, but it's the reality." After Cross rode off, Grant sat on the porch steps, his head in his hands. Elena sat beside him. "We knew it wouldn't be easy," she said. "Doesn't make it less frustrating." "No, but at least someone's paying attention now." Grant looked at her. "You really think that Marshall's going to help?" "I think he'll try. Whether it's enough." She trailed off. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Eli came out and sat on Grant's other side, and the three of them stayed there until the sky turned purple and the first stars appeared. "We're going to make it," Eli said quietly. "Aren't we?" Grant put an arm around his son's shoulders. "Yeah, we are." Elena wished she felt as certain. "But..." The weeks that followed were strange, tense but quiet, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Kane didn't attack, didn't send his men, didn't make any overt moves, but his presence hung over the valley like smoke, suffocating and inescapable. Marshal Cross came and went, interviewing people, examining burned-out buildings, compiling his case. He didn't share much about what he was finding, which made everyone nervous. Elena threw herself into the ranch work with a kind of desperate energy. She repaired fences, tended the garden, helped with the cattle. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spinning out into worst-case scenarios. One afternoon, she was in the kitchen making preserves, strawberries from the garden, sugar she'd bought in town, glass jars lined up on the counter, when Grant came in looking troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked. He sat at the table. "Mitchell stopped by. Says Kane's been buying up businesses in town. The general store, the feed supplier, the boarding house. He's tightening his grip. Elena's hand stilled on the jar she was filling. Why? Control. If he owns everything, he controls who gets supplies, who gets credit, who gets to survive. It's another kind of weapon. Can he do that? He's got the money, and with enough money you can do just about anything. Elena set the jar down carefully. Then we find a way to cut off his money. How? The man's rich. Nobody's rich enough to survive if their income dries up. What's Kane's money come from? Grant thought about it. Cattle, mostly. He's got the biggest operation in 3 counties. Sells to the railroad, to the military, to anyone buying beef. Then we go after his cattle. Elena, I know, but what other choice do we have? He's strangling this valley economically. If we don't do something, he wins without firing another shot. Grant rubbed his face. Even if we wanted to, how would we do it? He's got armed guards watching his herds. I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. She went back to her preserves, sealing jars with hands that shook slightly. Grant watched her for a long moment. You know what scares me most? He said quietly. What? How much you've changed. When you first got here, you were terrified, angry, lost. Now you're planning raids on cattle herds like it's nothing. Elena looked at him. I'm not the same person who got off that wagon. No, you're not. He stood and walked over to her. But I need you to promise me something. What? Don't lose yourself completely. Don't become so hard that there's nothing soft left. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I'm trying not to. I know. Just remember, you don't have to fight every battle alone. You've got me. You've got Eli. You've got this whole valley behind you. She set down the spoon she'd been using and turned to face him fully. I'm scared, Grant. All the time. I'm scared Kane's gonna win. Scared we're gonna lose everything. Scared that even if we survive, the cost is going to break us. Grant pulled her into his arms. We're already broken. We've been broken from the start, but broken things can still be strong. They can still hold together. Elena pressed her face against his chest and let herself cry, really cry, for the first time since the night she'd been sold. Grant held her through it, one hand stroking her hair, saying nothing because there was nothing to say. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, but she felt steadier. Sorry, she said, don't be. You needed that. I hate crying. I know, but it's not weakness. It's just being human. She smiled weakly. When did you get so wise? Catherine. She used to say the same thing to me when things got bad. His expression softened. You remind me of her sometimes. Not in looks, but in spirit. That stubborn refusal to give up. You loved her a lot. I did. Still do, in a way. He cupped Elena's face in his hands. But I'm learning to love you too. And that doesn't diminish what I had with her. It's just different, new. Elena's breath caught. You love me? Yeah, I do. It took me a while to figure it out, but I do. I love you too, she said, and realized it was true. Somewhere between the fear and the fighting and the desperate scramble for survival, she'd fallen completely in love with this broken, stubborn man and his broken, stubborn life. Grant kissed her, and this time it was slow and gentle, and full of promises neither of them was sure they could keep. Gats. Marshal Cross returned 2 weeks later with news. He gathered everyone in Mitchell's rebuilt barn, every rancher in the valley, plus their families. The crowd was tense, expectant. Cross stood at the front, his notebook in hand. I've completed my investigation, he said, and I've got good news and bad news. Give us the bad first, someone called out. The bad news is I don't have enough physical evidence to arrest Victor Kane on criminal charges. Everything I've found is circumstantial, testimonies sure, but nothing that would hold up against his lawyers in court. The crowd erupted in angry shouts. Cross held up his hand. The good news, he said, louder, is that I've found evidence of fraud. Kane's been filing false land claims, forging documents, bribing territorial officials. That's federal, and that I can prove. The shouting stopped. How long until you can arrest him? Grant asked. I've already sent the paperwork to the territorial governor's office. Should have an arrest warrant within the week. And then what? Then Kane goes to trial, federal trial, which means his bought judges can't help him. If he's convicted, and I think he will be, he's looking at years in prison, maybe a decade. Elena felt hope flare in her chest for the first time in months. What about his men? Without Kane bankrolling them, most will scatter. The ones who committed crimes, will deal with them as we can, but the head of the snake will be cut off. People started talking excitedly, relief spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Mitchell clapped Cross on the shoulder. You did it, Marshal. We all did it. You folks stood up when it mattered. That's what made the difference. Grant found Elena in the crowd and pulled her aside. It's almost over. Almost, she agreed. But Kane's not in custody yet. You think he'll run? I think he'll do something desperate. Men like that always do. Grant's expression darkened. Then we stay vigilant until he's behind bars. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting. Eli was waiting on the porch, and they told him the news. For the first time in months, the boy's face lit up with genuine happiness. Does this mean we can stop sleeping in shifts? He asked. Not yet, Grant said. Not until Kane's actually arrested. When will that be? Soon. Few days, maybe. But few days turned into a week, and the week stretched into 2. The warrant still hadn't arrived. Cross sent word that there were bureaucratic delays, legal reviews, nothing to worry about. Grant worried anyway. So did Elena. On the 14th day, she woke in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke. She bolted upright, heart racing, and ran to the window. Orange light flickered in the distance, not from the house, but from the barn. Grant! She screamed. He was up instantly, grabbing his rifle, running downstairs. Elena followed, pulling on boots, her hands clumsy with panic. Outside, the barn was burning. Not the whole structure yet, just one corner, but the fire was spreading fast. Eli was already there with buckets, trying to douse the flames. The horses! Elena shouted. Grant ran inside the burning barn. Elena heard the animals screaming, heard Grant yelling, and then he emerged leading 2 horses, their eyes white with terror. He shoved the reins at Elena. Get them away from here! She pulled the horses to safety while Grant went back for the others. The smoke was thick now, black and choking. The heat was intense, even from yards away. Grant got the 3rd horse out, then the 4th, but when he went back for the 5th, part of the roof collapsed. Elena screamed his name. For a horrible moment, there was nothing but fire and smoke and the sound of burning wood. Then Grant staggered out, coughing, his shirt scorched, dragging the last horse by sheer force of will. He collapsed in the dirt. Elena and Eli ran to him. I'm fine, he gasped. I'm fine. He wasn't fine. His hands were burned, his face was black with soot, and he was wheezing like his lungs were full of ash. But he was alive. They watched the barn burn. There was no saving it. By the time the flames died down, nothing was left but charred timbers and ash. Kane, Grant said hoarsely, had to be. But why now? Eli asked. The marshal's about to arrest him. Because he knows, Elena said quietly. He knows he's out of time. This is his last move. Grant struggled to his feet. Then we end it. Tonight. You're in no condition? I don't care. I'm done waiting. Done playing defense. Grant's eyes were hard. Kane wants to burn things? Fine. Let's burn his whole world down. Elena should have talked him out of it. Should have insisted he rest, heal, think clearly. But she didn't. Because she was done too. Done being afraid. Done waiting for someone else to fix this. What's the plan? She asked. They gathered what was left of the Valley families 2 hours later. Not everyone came. Some were too scared, too tired, too broken. But enough showed up, enough angry, desperate people who'd lost too much to care about the consequences anymore. Grant laid out the plan. We ride to Kane's main ranch, we surround it, and we demand he surrender to the marshal's custody. And if he doesn't, someone asked, then we make him. That's vigilante justice. No, that's citizens enforcing the law when the law won't enforce itself. Grant's voice was raw from smoke but steady. The warrant's coming. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. But we're not waiting. Kane crossed the line tonight. He tried to kill my horses, burn my barn, maybe kill me and my family. I'm done giving him chances. Mitchell stood. I'm with you. Others stood too, one by one, until nearly 20 men were on their feet, armed and ready. They rode out under a moonless sky, a grim procession of vengeance and justice blurred together. Elena rode beside Grant, her rifle across her lap, her heart steady and cold. Kane's ranch appeared in the distance, a sprawling compound with multiple buildings, corrals, bunkhouses. Lights burned in the main house. Guards patrolled the perimeter. "Spread out," Grant said quietly. "Surround the place. No one gets in or out." The men moved into position. Elena stayed with Grant, and together they rode straight up to the main house. A guard stepped into their path. "That's far enough." "Get Kane," Grant said. "He's not seeing anyone." Grant raised his rifle and fired a shot into the air. The crack echoed across the compound. Doors slammed open. Men came running. "I said get Kane," Grant roared. A minute later, Victor Kane stepped onto his porch. He was in shirt sleeves, no jacket, but he still managed to look composed, almost amused. "Holloway," he said. "To what do I owe this dramatic visit?" "You burned my barn." "Did I? Can you prove it?" "I don't need to prove it. I know." Kane smiled. "Knowing and proving are very different things. There's a federal warrant coming for you," Grant said. "Fraud, bribery, forging documents. You're done, Kane. It's over." "Is it?" Kane looked around at the armed men surrounding his property. "Looks to me like you're the ones committing crimes, trespassing, threatening. I'd be within my rights to shoot you where you stand." "You could try." "Or," Kane said smoothly, "you could all turn around and leave, and we'll forget this happened." "Not a chance." Kane's smile faded. "Then you're fools, all of you. You think taking me down will fix anything? There's a dozen men like me waiting to fill the void. The strong take from the weak. That's how the world works." "Not anymore," Elena said. Kane's eyes shifted to her. "Ah, the bot girl. Still playing ranch wife? Better than playing tyrant. You think you've won something, don't you? Standing there with your borrowed gun and your borrowed confidence. But you're still just a thing someone paid for. You'll always be that." Elena felt the words hit like a physical blow, but she didn't flinch. "You're right. I was bought. Sold by a man who was too weak to see any other way, but I earned everything that came after. Every scar, every victory, every piece of this life. You didn't buy your power. You stole it, and stolen things never last." Kane's face darkened. "Big words for someone who doesn't understand how this works." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Elena said. "You're scared. You're watching everything you built collapse, and you can't stop it, so you lash out, burn barns, threaten families, try to make everyone else feel as small and powerless as you really are inside." "Enough," Kane snapped. His hand moved toward his hip. Every gun came up. "Don't," Grant said. Kane froze. For a long moment nobody moved, then slowly Kane raised his hands. "Smart choice," Mitchell said. They bound Kane's hands and put him on a horse. His men watched, but didn't interfere. They knew when the game was over. Grant sent riders to fetch Marshal Cross, and they kept Kane under guard until the marshal arrived at dawn. Cross took one look at the situation and shook his head. "You folks couldn't wait one more day?" "He burned my barn last night," Grant said. "Tried to kill my family. We're done waiting." Cross sighed. "Lucky for you, the warrant came through this morning. Was planning to arrest him today anyway." He looked at Kane. "Victor Kane, you're under arrest for fraud, bribery, and falsifying federal land documents. You have the right to—" "I know my rights," Kane interrupted. "Good. Then you won't mind coming quietly." They hauled Kane off his horse and into Cross's custody. As they led him away, he looked back at Grant and Elena. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," Grant said. "It is." They watched Kane disappear into the marshal's wagon, and as it rolled away, Elena felt something inside her finally unclench. "We did it," Eli said, his voice full of wonder. "We did," Grant agreed. People started heading home, exhausted but victorious. Grant, Elena, and Eli rode back to the ranch in silence. When they arrived, the burned barn was still smoking in the early morning light. "We'll rebuild," Grant said. "Yeah," Elena agreed. "We will." The rebuilding started the next day. Not just the barn, but everything. The fences Kane's men had cut, the pastures that had been trampled, the trust that had been broken. Word spread fast about Kane's arrest. The businesses he'd bought were seized as part of the federal case. His cattle were auctioned off to pay fines, his hired guns scattered to the wind. Within a month, it was like Victor Kane had never existed. but the scars remained. Elena helped raise a new barn with timber donated by neighboring ranches. She worked alongside men and women who'd become friends, family even, through shared suffering. The work was hard, the days long, but there was something healing about it. One evening, as the barn's frame was going up, Grant found her sitting on a pile of lumber, watching the sunset. "Tired?" he asked. "Exhausted, but good exhausted." He sat beside her. "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About us. About making this official." Elena's heart skipped. "Official how?" Grant pulled something from his pocket, a simple gold band worn smooth with age. "It was my mother's. Not fancy, but it's all I've got." Elena stared at the ring. "I know I bought you," Grant said quietly. "I know that's not how anyone should start. But I want to do this right. I want to marry you because we choose each other, not because of money or desperation or survival, because we love each other." Tears blurred Elena's vision. "You're asking me to marry you?" "Yeah, I am. Even though I shot one of your enemies, planned raids, and generally caused chaos? Especially because of all that." Elena laughed through her tears. "You're insane." "Probably. Is that a yes?" She took the ring from his hand and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Yes," she said. "It's a yes." Grant kissed her as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. And for the first time since she'd climbed into that wagon months ago, Elena felt like she was exactly where she belonged. But there was one more thing she needed to do. 2 weeks later, Elena rode back to her father's farm. She hadn't told Grant where she was going, just said she needed to take care of something. He'd wanted to come with her, but she'd insisted this was something she had to do alone. The farm looked worse than she remembered. The house was falling apart, the fields overgrown, everything neglected and dying. She tied her horse to a post and walked to the door. Her father answered on the third knock. He looked older, grayer, more broken than when she'd last seen him. His eyes widened when he recognized her. "Elena," he said. "Hello, Father." They stared at each other. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," he finally said. "Neither did I." Are you all right?" Elena almost laughed. "Am I all right? You sold me for $300 and a sack of flour, and you want to know if I'm all right?" Her father's face crumpled. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice. You just chose the easy one." "The farm was failing. We were starving. You thought getting rid of me would solve your problems." Elena stepped closer. "Did it?" He didn't answer. "I came here to tell you something," Elena said. "I forgive you." Her father looked up, shocked. "Not because you deserve it," she continued, "but because carrying that anger was destroying me. So I'm letting it go. I'm letting you go." "Elena, I'm getting married to the man you sold me to. Turns out he's a good person. Better than you ever were." She pulled an envelope from her coat. "This is $300. What you sold me for. Consider us even." She set the envelope on the step and turned to leave. "Wait," her father called. "Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Elena paused but didn't turn around. "I know you are, but sorry doesn't change what happened. Goodbye, Father." She rode away without looking back, and with every mile between her and that broken farm, she felt lighter. By the time she reached the Holloway Ranch, her ranch now, her home, the sun was setting and Grant was waiting on the porch. "You okay?" he asked. Elena dismounted and walked into his arms. "Yeah, I am now." "What did you do?" "Made peace with the past." "Good." He kissed the top of her head. "Because we've got a future to build." And for the first time in her life, Elena actually believed in that future. They were married on a cold October morning in the Valley Church, with half the territory in attendance and the other half pretending they had better things to do. Elena wore a dress Mrs. Mitchell had sewn from fabric Grant had ridden 2 days to buy, pale blue with white lace at the collar. Nothing fancy, but clean and new and hers. Grant wore his Sunday suit, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar from the trunk where it had been stored since Catherine's funeral. And when he saw Elena walking down the aisle, his eyes got wet and he didn't bother hiding it. Eli stood beside his father as best man, looking uncomfortable in a collar that was too tight, and Mrs. Carson stood with Elena because she'd insisted someone should, and Elena hadn't argued. The ceremony was short, the vows simple, and when the preacher said Grant could kiss his bride, he did it like he meant it, like he was making a promise in front of everyone that this time he wouldn't let go. The reception was held in the newly rebuilt barn, which still smelled like fresh timber and paint. Someone had brought a fiddle, someone else had brought whiskey, and before long people were dancing and laughing and forgetting for just one night how hard everything had been. Elena danced with Grant until her feet hurt, then with Eli, who stepped on her toes twice and apologized 3 times, then with Mitchell, who told her she'd turned out tougher than any of them had expected, and she should be proud. She danced until the sun went down and the lanterns were lit and the stars came out cold and bright overhead. When the last guests finally left, stumbling home in the dark, Grant and Elena stood alone in the yard looking at their ranch, their home, and Elena felt something settle deep in her chest that she thought might be happiness. "You tired?" Grant asked. "Exhausted." "Good wedding?" "Best I've ever had." He smiled. "It's the only one you've ever had." "Still counts." They went inside together, and for the first time Elena walked into that house not as someone who'd been bought or someone who was working off a debt, but as someone who belonged there completely. Grant carried her over the threshold because he said it was tradition, and Elena let him, even though she thought it was ridiculous. They made it halfway up the stairs before he had to set her down because his back gave out, and they both ended up laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. That night they lay together in the bed that had been his and Catherine's and was now his and Elena's, and Grant held her like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. "I never thought I'd have this again," he said quietly into the darkness. "Have what?" "Someone to love. Someone who loved me back. A reason to care about tomorrow." Elena turned to face him. "You always had Eli. That's different. He's my son. I love him because I have to. But you, I love you because I choose to. That's harder, scarier." "Why scarier?" "Because choosing means you could choose to leave, and I don't know what I'd do if you did." Elena pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "I'm not leaving. I already told you that. People say things, doesn't mean they're true. I mean it." "I know." Grant kissed her forehead. "I'm just scared of losing you the way I lost her." "You won't. You can't promise that." "No," Elena admitted. "But I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay. Is that enough?" Grant pulled her closer. "Yeah, it's enough." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in either of their lives, neither of them had nightmares. Juan. Winter came early that year, hard and mean, but the ranch was ready. They'd stockpiled hay, repaired every fence, insulated the barn, brought the cattle in close. When the first snow fell in mid-November, Elena stood on the porch watching it come down and felt proud instead of afraid. Eli had grown 3 inches since summer and was starting to look less like a boy and more like a young man. He took his responsibilities seriously now, waking before dawn to help with feeding, checking on sick animals without being asked, fixing things that broke before Grant even noticed they were broken. He still had a smart mouth and a tendency to sulk when things didn't go his way, but he was trying, and that mattered. One evening in late November, Elena was making dinner when she felt the first wave of nausea hit. She made it to the basin just in time, retching until there was nothing left. Grant came running. "You all right?" "Fine, just ate something bad." But it happened again the next morning, and the morning after that. By the 4th day, Elena knew what it meant even though she didn't want to admit it. She was pregnant. The realization hit her like a kick to the stomach. She sat down hard on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking, her mind racing. A baby. She was going to have a baby. Grant's baby. A tiny human being that would depend on her for everything, and she had no idea how to be a mother because her own mother had died before teaching her anything useful. And what if she was terrible at it? What if she failed? What if something went wrong? She heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly wiped her face. Grant appeared in the doorway. "You're sick again." "Yeah." He sat beside her. "How long has this been going on?" "Few days." Grant was quiet for a moment, then carefully, "Elena, are you pregnant?" She looked at him, and the fear must have shown on her face because his expression softened immediately. "Hey," he said gently. "It's okay." "It's not okay. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a mother. Nobody knows how to be a parent before they are one."
That's not reassuring.
"I know, but it's true." Grant took her hand. "When Eli was born, I was terrified. Thought I'd drop him or break him or do something wrong. Catherine had to talk me down from panic at least once a day for the first month. What if I'm bad at it? You won't be. You don't know that. You don't know."
Yes, I do. You're the strongest person I know. You survived being sold, survived a war with Kane, survived everything this place threw at you. You can survive a baby. Elena wanted to believe him, but the fear was so big it felt like it was crushing her lungs. "What if I end up like my mother?" she whispered. "What if I die and leave this child alone?"
Grant pulled her into his arms. "Then I'll raise them, same as I raised Eli, but you're not going to die. I won't let you. You can't control that. Watch me." Despite everything, Elena laughed. "You're impossible. And you're stuck with me." She pressed her face against his shoulder and let herself cry, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming terror of loving someone so much and knowing how easily it could all be taken away. Boek. The pregnancy was hard. Elena was sick constantly for the first 3 months, couldn't keep food down, lost weight instead of gaining it. Grant hovered like a nervous hawk, which drove her crazy but also made her feel safer than she ever had before. By spring, the sickness finally eased and Elena's body started changing in ways that were both fascinating and terrifying. Her stomach grew round, her breasts swelled, her back ached constantly. She couldn't ride anymore, couldn't lift anything heavy, couldn't do half the work she was used to doing, and the helplessness made her furious. "I'm useless," she complained one afternoon, sitting on the porch watching Grant and Eli repair a fence she should have been helping with. Mrs. Mitchell, who'd come by to check on her, shook her head. "You're growing a human being. That's not useless." "Feels useless." "That's because you're stubborn. Always have been." Elena smiled despite herself. "Grant says the same thing." "Smart man." Mrs. Mitchell set down her knitting. "Can I tell you something?" "Sure." "When I was pregnant with my first, I was terrified. Thought I'd be a terrible mother. Thought I wasn't ready. But then the baby came and I realized something important." "What?" "You're never ready. Not really. But you love them anyway. And that love makes you figure it out." Elena put a hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick. "What if love isn't enough? It's always enough. Maybe not to make everything perfect, but enough to keep going. And that's all any of us can do. Keep going." The words settled into Elena's chest and stayed there. The baby came in late August during a thunderstorm that shook the house and turned the sky black. Elena's water broke in the middle of the night, and Grant went into a controlled panic that would have been funny if Elena hadn't been in so much pain she wanted to die. Mrs. Mitchell arrived within the hour, took one look at Elena, and sent Grant downstairs because he was making things worse. Eli was dispatched to boil water and fetch towels and generally stay out of the way. The labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of pain so intense Elena thought she was being split in half. She screamed. She cursed. She grabbed Mrs. Mitchell's hand so hard she left bruises. Grant tried to come upstairs twice and was turned away both times. Finally, just as the storm was breaking and the first light of dawn was creeping through the window, Elena felt something shift. Mrs. Mitchell told her to push, and she did, pushing with everything she had left. And then suddenly there was a baby crying, and Mrs. Mitchell was saying, "It's a girl, Elena. You have a daughter." Elena collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. Mrs. Mitchell cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a blanket and placed her in Elena's arms. She was tiny, red-faced and wrinkled and perfect. Dark hair plastered to her head, eyes squeezed shut, fists waving in the air. "She's beautiful," Elena whispered. "She is," Mrs. Mitchell agreed. "You did good." Grant burst into the room before anyone could stop him. He took one look at Elena and the baby, and his face just crumpled. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his daughter like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "We have a daughter," Elena said. "Yeah, we do." Grant reached out with one finger and the baby grabbed it, her tiny hand wrapping around him. "What should we name her?" Elena thought about it, about everything she'd survived to get to this moment. About the woman who'd raised Grant and taught him how to be kind even when the world was cruel. About second chances and new beginnings. "Catherine," she said. "We'll call her Catherine." Grant looked at her, his eyes shining. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He kissed Elena's forehead, then his daughter's. "Hello, Catherine. Welcome home." Poseidon. Being a mother was harder than anything Elena had ever done. Catherine didn't sleep through the night for the first 6 months. She cried for hours at a time for no reason Elena could figure out. She refused to nurse properly, and Elena's breasts ached constantly from trying to feed a baby who didn't seem interested in eating. Elena was exhausted all the time. She walked around in a fog of sleeplessness and frustration and love so fierce it scared her. Some days she cried because she was so tired. Other days she cried because she looked at Catherine and couldn't believe something so small and perfect had come from her. Grant helped as much as he could, but he was running the ranch and couldn't be everywhere at once. Eli tried to help too, but he was awkward with the baby and terrified of dropping her, so mostly he just watched from a distance and offered encouragement that wasn't particularly encouraging. One night, when Catherine had been crying for 3 hours straight and nothing Elena did would calm her, Grant found Elena sitting in the rocking chair sobbing. "I can't do this," Elena said. "I'm failing. She won't stop crying and I don't know what's wrong and I'm a terrible mother." Grant took Catherine from her arms. "You're not a terrible mother, you're exhausted. There's a difference." "She hates me." "She's a baby. She doesn't hate anyone. She's just figuring out how the world works." Grant walked around the room, bouncing Catherine gently. "You want to know what Catherine told me?" "Babies don't talk." "Mine does. She told me her mama is doing an incredible job and she's sorry for being difficult, but she's brand new at this whole existing thing and it's overwhelming." Despite everything, Elena smiled. "You're making that up." "Maybe, but it's probably true." Catherine's crying started to ease. Grant kept walking, kept bouncing, and within a few minutes she was asleep against his shoulder. "How did you do that?" Elena asked. "Practice. And luck." Grant carefully transferred the baby back to Elena. "You're doing fine, better than fine. You just need to stop expecting yourself to be perfect." "I'm not expecting perfection, just competence." "You are competent. You're also human, and humans need sleep. So I'm taking the next shift. You go to bed." "Grant, that wasn't a suggestion." Elena was too tired to argue. She went to bed and slept for 6 hours straight, and when she woke up, Grant was in the chair with Catherine, both of them asleep. And Elena realized that maybe she wasn't failing after all. Maybe she was just learning. Catherine grew. Slowly, stubbornly, in fits and starts. By her first birthday, she was walking, sort of, stumbling around the house and grabbing onto furniture. By 18 months, she was talking in short sentences that didn't always make sense, but were undeniably words. By 2, she was a tiny tyrant who ruled the household with an iron fist disguised as chubby fingers. Elena discovered that motherhood wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up every day even when you were exhausted. It was about making mistakes and apologizing. It was about loving someone so completely that their happiness mattered more than your own. She also discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news didn't terrify her. It still scared her. She remembered how hard it had been with Catherine. But there was a difference between fear and terror. Fear you could work with. Terror just paralyzed you. Grant took the news with the same mixture of excitement and panic he'd had the first time. Eli, now 17 and increasingly independent, just shrugged and said, "Cool, I guess." Catherine, who was 3 by the time her brother was born, was fascinated by the baby. She insisted on helping with everything, bringing diapers, singing songs, patting his head with a gentleness that surprised everyone. They named him Samuel, after Mitchell, who died the previous winter from pneumonia. The whole valley had mourned him, and Grant had said it was only right to honor the man who'd stood with them when it mattered most. Samuel was easier than Catherine had been. He slept better, ate better, cried less, or maybe Elena was just better at handling it now. Either way, she felt less like she was drowning and more like she was actually managing. The ranch grew too. With Kane gone and his land parceled out to the valley families, there was room to expand. Grant bought more cattle, hired 2 ranch hands, built a second barn. Elena started selling eggs and butter in town, building a small business that brought in steady money. By the time Catherine was 5 and Samuel was 2, The Holloway Ranch was one of the strongest operations in the territory. Not the biggest, that honor went to the Garrett family, but solid, profitable, respected. Elena had gone from property to partner to matriarch in the span of 5 years, and the transformation still stunned her sometimes. One afternoon in late spring, Elena was in the garden with Catherine when a stranger rode up to the house. He was young, maybe 25, well-dressed, with the look of someone who'd spent more time in cities than on ranches. Grant came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "Help you?" The stranger dismounted. "I'm looking for Elena Voss. I was told she lives here." Elena stood, wiping dirt from her hands. "I'm Elena Holloway. Voss was my maiden name." The stranger looked surprised. "You're married." "For 6 years now. Who's asking?" "My name's Thomas Voss. I'm your brother." Elena felt the ground tilt under her feet. "My what?" "Your brother. Half-brother, technically. Your father, he passed away last month. Left me a letter telling me about you. Said I should find you, make sure you were all right." Elena's mind reeled. She had a brother. Her father had remarried, had another child, and never told her. She didn't know whether to laugh or scream. "I'm fine," she said finally. "You can tell him, oh, he's dead." "Yes, I'm sorry." Elena wasn't sorry. Wasn't anything, really, just numb. What did he die of? His heart gave out. He'd been sick for a while. Did he suffer? Thomas looked uncomfortable. Some. "Good." Grant stepped forward. "Elena, it's fine." Elena looked at her brother, this stranger who shared her blood but nothing else. "Why are you really here?" Thomas shifted his weight. "The farm. It's yours now, or half yours anyway. The will splits it between us." "I don't want it." "You don't even want to see it?" "I've seen it. It's falling apart and full of bad memories. You can have my half." "Elena, it's worth money. Not a lot, but—" "I don't care." Elena's voice was harder than she intended. "That farm, that life, that man, they're all dead to me. Have been for years. You want the land? Take it, sell it, burn it down. I don't care." Thomas stared at her. He felt terrible, you know. About what he did. Selling you. He talked about it near the end, said it was the worst thing he'd ever done. He was right. He wanted me to tell you he was sorry. Elena looked at this young man who'd gotten the version of their father she'd never had. The sober one, the one who tried to make amends, the one who stuck around. She felt a flash of something that might have been jealousy or might have been pity. "I forgave him years ago," she said quietly. "Not for him, for me. But that doesn't mean I want anything from him now. Tell him I said his apology is accepted, and we're done." Thomas nodded slowly. "I'll respect that. But if you ever change your mind, I won't." He climbed back on his horse. "You have a beautiful family, Elena. I'm glad you found happiness." "Thank you." After he rode away, Grant came and stood beside her. Catherine grabbed Elena's hand. "Mama, who was that man?" "Someone from a long time ago," Elena said. "Nobody important." She meant it. That part of her life was over, buried. She'd built something new here, something that mattered, and she wasn't going to let ghosts drag her backward. That night, lying in bed with Grant snoring softly beside her and the kids asleep in their rooms, Elena thought about the girl who'd climbed into a wagon 6 years ago with nothing but fear and anger and a desperate will to survive. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd fought for everything she had and won. But the years passed. Catherine grew tall and fierce, with her mother's stubbornness and her father's quiet strength. Samuel grew thoughtful and gentle, always reading, always asking questions. They had a third child, another girl they named Rose, who came into the world screaming and never really stopped, loud and wild and full of joy. Eli left when he was 20, heading east to try his hand at business, and Elena missed him fiercely, even though she understood why he needed to go. Grant aged gracefully, his hair going gray, his face getting more lined, but his hands stayed steady and his love stayed constant. The ranch prospered. They weathered droughts and hard winters and market crashes. They expanded the cattle operation, bought neighboring land, built a house big enough for their growing family. Elena's egg and butter business grew into a full dairy operation that employed 6 people. By the time Elena was 35, the Holloway Ranch was one of the most respected properties in 3 territories. People came from miles around to buy their cattle, their dairy products, their expertise. Elena had become exactly what Victor Kane had accused her of being, a matriarch. But she'd earned it. Every scar, every gray hair, every callus on her hands. One evening, sitting on the porch watching the sun set over land she'd fought to keep, Grant came and sat beside her. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Regret what?" "Staying, marrying me, this life." Elena looked at him, this man who'd bought her in desperation and loved her in truth. "Every day." Grant's face fell. "Oh," Elena laughed. "I'm kidding. No, I don't regret it, not even a little." "You're terrible. You married me anyway. Best decision I ever made, after buying you in the first place. That was your worst decision." "Maybe, but it led to all the best ones." They sat in comfortable silence, hands joined, watching their children play in the yard. Catherine was teaching Rose how to rope a fence post. Samuel was reading under a tree. The ranch stretched out around them, alive and thriving. "You know what I realized?" Elena said. "What?" "I spent so long being angry about being bought, about being treated like property. But that anger was keeping me trapped just as much as the transaction did." "What changed?" "I stopped waiting for someone to give me freedom and just took it. Turned out freedom wasn't about leaving or staying or what someone paid for me. It was about choosing, every day, who I wanted to be, what I wanted to build, who I wanted to love." Grant squeezed her hand. "And who did you choose to love?" "You, unfortunately. You and these chaotic children and this ridiculous ranch that nearly killed us about 40 times. "Only 40? I counted at least 50. Elena smiled. "See? Can't even agree on that." They sat together until the stars came out, and Elena thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The scared girl, the angry survivor, the reluctant bride, the uncertain mother, the fierce protector. They were all still in there somewhere, layered like rings in a tree, each one a year of growth. She wasn't perfect, would never be perfect, but she was whole, and that was enough. When Elena was 63, Grant died in his sleep on a cold November morning. Just slipped away between one breath and the next, his hand still holding hers, his face peaceful. Elena sat with him for a long time before calling the children. She held his hand and talked to him and said all the things she'd never gotten to say to Catherine, the first Catherine, the one who'd built this place and loved this man and died too young. "Thank you for buying me," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me even when I made it hard. Thank you for everything." The funeral was held on a bright winter day, and half the territory showed up. Elena stood beside the grave with her children and grandchildren around her and knew that Grant would have hated the fuss, but loved seeing everyone together. After everyone left, Elena stayed behind. She sat on the cold ground beside the fresh grave and let herself cry, really cry, the kind of crying that comes from losing something you can't ever get back. But she didn't fall apart. Grant had taught her that. You could break and still be strong. You could grieve and still keep going. So she did. Elena lived another 15 years after Grant died. She ran the ranch with Catherine's help, watched her grandchildren grow, saw her great-grandchildren born. She was fierce until the end, sharp-tongued and stubborn, and absolutely unwilling to let anyone tell her what to do. On her last day, sitting in a chair beneath the big oak tree they'd planted beside the rebuilt barn all those years ago, surrounded by family, she felt ready. Catherine sat beside her, holding her hand just like Elena had held Grant's. "You had a good life, Mama," Catherine said. "I did. Hard, but good." "Any regrets?" Elena thought about it, about the father who'd sold her, the fear she'd carried, the battles she'd fought, the people she'd lost. "No," she said finally. "No regrets, just lessons." "What's the most important lesson?" Elena looked at her daughter, at the strong, capable woman she'd raised, and smiled. "That freedom isn't something someone gives you. It's something you take. Every single day. You wake up and you choose who you're going to be. And nobody, not your father, not your husband, not the whole damn world, can take that choice away unless you let them." Is that what you did? Every day of my life. From the moment I climbed into that wagon until right now.
Catherine's eyes filled with tears. I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweetheart. You and your brother and sister and all these beautiful, chaotic people we made. You're my real freedom. Not the land, not the ranch. You. Elena closed her eyes and felt the sun warm on her face. She heard her grandchildren laughing somewhere nearby, heard the cattle lowing in the distance, heard the wind moving through the trees. And she thought about the girl she'd been, 19 years old, standing in the mud, watching her father take money for her life. That girl had been so afraid, so angry, so certain she'd never be anything more than property. But that girl had been wrong. She'd become a fighter, a mother, a builder, a survivor. She'd become free. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Elena Holloway died on a bright afternoon in late spring, surrounded by the people she loved, on the land she'd fought for, in the life she'd built from nothing. The frightened girl who'd been sold for $300 and a sack of flour was long gone. In her place was a woman who'd never been owned by anyone except herself. A woman who'd learned that the only chains that truly bind you are the ones you refuse to break. And Elena Holloway had broken every single one.